There are some people in this world who walk through life without anyone ever really noticing them. They sit in the back of classrooms. They eat lunch alone. They do their homework, help their families, and go to sleep every night wondering if they will ever matter to anyone outside their own small world. Was one of those people. She was 17 years old and lived in a tiny apartment above her family's laundromat in a part of the city that most people drove past without a second glance. The building was old. The walls were thin. Every night, she could hear the washing machines rumbling downstairs like a tired heartbeat that never stopped. Her parents had moved to this country before she was born. They came with nothing but 2 suitcases and a dream of giving their future children a better life. And they worked for that dream every single day. Her father opened the laundromat at 6 in the morning. Her mother closed it at 10 at night. In between, they folded clothes, fixed broken machines, and smiled at customers even when their backs ached and their feet were swollen. Helped whenever she could. After school, she would rush home, drop her bag, and take over the front counter so her mother could rest for an hour. She never complained. She understood that this was what families did. They carried the weight together. But there was a part of that nobody knew about. A secret she kept hidden like a treasure buried deep underground. She loved music. Not just loved it. She needed it the way other people needed air. When she listened to a beautiful piece of piano music, something inside her chest would tighten and release at the same time. It was the strangest feeling. Like coming home to a place she had never been. It started when she was 12. She had been scrolling through videos online, bored and tired after a long day at school. And then, by accident, she clicked on a video of a man playing the piano. He was performing something called a ballade by a composer named Chopin. Had never heard of him. She did not know anything about classical music. But from the first note, she could not look away. The music was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It was soft and then loud. It was gentle and then furious. It told a story without words, and by the end realized she had tears running down her face. She did not understand why she was crying, but she knew, in that moment, that she wanted to make music like that. She wanted to sit at a piano and create something so beautiful that it could make a stranger feel everything. There was just one problem. Her family did not have a piano. They could barely afford rent. A real piano cost thousands of dollars. It was impossible. But did not give up. She started saving every small bit of money she could find. Birthday money from her grandmother. Coins she picked up from the laundromat floor. A few dollars here and there from small tasks. It took her almost a year. But finally, she had enough to buy a used electronic keyboard from a second-hand store 3 bus rides away. The keyboard was old and slightly broken. Some of the keys stuck. The sound was not great, but it was the most beautiful thing she had ever owned. She set it up in the corner of her tiny bedroom, plugged in her headphones, and began to teach herself how to play. Nobody knew. Not her parents, who were too exhausted to notice. Not her younger brother, who was always playing video games. Not anyone at school, where was practically invisible. And that was fine with her. This was her secret world, her escape. The one place where she was not the quiet girl from the laundromat. At the keyboard with her headphones on and her eyes closed, she could be anyone. Now, 5 years later, was in her final year of high school. She attended a large public school in a rough neighborhood. The building was old and overcrowded. The hallways smelled like cheap cleaning products and forgotten dreams. Most students were just trying to survive until graduation. College felt like a distant fantasy for kids like them. The arts program at her school was almost non-existent. There was a music class, but it was treated like a joke. The teacher, a tired man named Mr., had given up on inspiring his students years ago. He showed up, played some recordings, gave easy assignments, and counted down the days until retirement. Had signed up for his class because she thought maybe, just maybe, she could learn something new about music. But instead, she spent most of the hour sitting in the back, doodling in her notebook and feeling disappointed. One Tuesday afternoon, Mr. made an announcement that changed everything. The school was going to host a spring recital. Every student in the music class was required to perform a piece on stage in front of an audience. It would count as their final grade. Felt her heart stop. A performance on stage, in front of people. She had never played for anyone in her entire life. The thought of it made her want to disappear into the floor. Around her, the other students groaned and complained. Nobody wanted to do this. But then they started talking about what they would play. Simple stuff, easy songs, nursery rhymes, beginner pieces that they could learn in a week without much effort. One girl said she would play the basic melody of a pop song. One boy said he would just bang out something random and hope for the best. Everyone laughed. Nobody was taking this seriously. Mr. walked around the room with a clipboard, writing down names and song choices. When he got to, he barely looked at her. "What are you going to play?" he asked, his voice flat and uninterested. Opened her mouth, but no words came out. She did not know what to say. She could not tell him the truth. She could not tell anyone. "I am still deciding," she finally whispered. Mr. shrugged and moved on to the next student. He did not ask any follow-up questions. He did not seem to care. To him, was just another unremarkable student who would probably play something forgettable and fade back into the background where she belonged. And maybe that was what hurt the most. Had spent 5 years teaching herself piano in secret. 5 years of late nights and sore fingers and moments of pure joy when she finally mastered a difficult passage. 5 years of dreaming about music while the washing machines rumbled beneath her feet. But to the rest of the world, she was nobody. Just a quiet girl who never spoke up. Just another face in a crowded hallway. Just someone who was expected to play something basic and be forgotten. That night, sat at her old keyboard in her tiny bedroom. She put on her headphones and stared at the keys for a long time. She thought about the recital. She thought about Mr. and the way he had looked right through her. She thought about all the times in her life when people had underestimated her because of where she came from or how she looked or how softly she spoke. And then she thought about the Chopin Ballade, the piece that had changed her life when she was 12, the piece she had been secretly practicing for the past 2 years, the piece that most professional pianists considered one of the hardest compositions ever written. It was crazy. It was impossible. A self-taught girl with a broken keyboard had no business attempting something like that. But as placed her fingers on the keys and began to play the opening notes, she felt something shift inside her chest. A spark, a fire, a voice that whispered words she desperately needed to hear. Maybe it was time to stop being invisible. Maybe it was time to show them who she really was. To understand what was about to attempt, you need to understand something about the piece she had chosen. The Chopin Ballade No. 1 in G minor is not just a difficult piece of music. It is considered by many professional pianists to be one of the most challenging compositions ever written for the piano. It lasts about 10 minutes. It contains passages so fast and complex that your fingers have to move in ways that seem almost inhuman. It demands not just technical skill but emotional depth. You cannot simply play the notes. You have to feel them. You have to tell a story with every phrase, every pause, every breath between the sounds. Concert pianists spend years perfecting this piece. They study at the finest music schools in the world. They practice on grand pianos that cost more than most people's houses. They have teachers who guide them through every measure, every detail, every tiny nuance. Had none of that. She had a $60 keyboard with sticky keys. She had YouTube tutorials and free sheet music she printed at the public library. She had no teacher, no formal training, and no one to tell her if she was doing things right or wrong. But she had something else, something that cannot be taught or bought or given. She had hunger. From the moment she first heard that ballad at 12 years old, knew she had to learn it. Not wanted to. Had to. It was like the music had reached inside her chest and planted a seed that would not stop growing until she made it her own. For the first 3 years, she did not even try. She knew she was not ready. Instead, she focused on the basics. She learned scales and chords. She practiced simple songs until her fingers knew where to go without her eyes having to look. She studied music theory from free websites and library books. She built her foundation one brick at a time, alone in her tiny bedroom while the rest of the world slept. It was not easy. There were nights when her fingers cramped so badly she had to soak them in warm water. There were times when she wanted to quit, when the gap between where she was and where she wanted to be felt too wide to ever cross. But every time she thought about giving up, she would put on her headphones and listen to that ballad again, and the fire inside her would reignite. When she turned 15, decided she was ready to begin. She printed out the sheet music at the library, 23 pages. She stared at the notes for a long time, her heart pounding. The complexity was terrifying. There were sections where both hands had to do completely different things at the same time. There were runs of notes so fast they looked like a blur on the page. There were moments of such delicate softness that even breathing too hard could ruin them. Most people would have looked at those pages and walked away, looked at them and got to work. She broke the piece into tiny sections, measure by measure, sometimes note by note. She would practice a single passage for an entire week before moving on. She recorded herself on her phone and listened back, cringing at every mistake, celebrating every small improvement. The hardest part was not having a teacher. When she got stuck, she had no one to ask. She had to figure everything out on her own. She watched videos of famous pianists performing the piece and studied their hands, their posture, the way their bodies moved with the music. She slowed down recordings to half speed, then quarter speed, trying to understand exactly what was happening in each moment. Some nights she cried from frustration. There was one passage in the middle of the piece that haunted her for months. Her fingers simply could not move fast enough. No matter how many times she practiced, she kept stumbling over the same notes. She started to believe that maybe her hands were just not built for this. Maybe she was fooling herself. Maybe a girl like her was never meant to play music like this. But she did not stop. She kept coming back to that passage, night after night, until her fingers bled and her wrists ached. And then one evening something magical happened. She played through it perfectly, not once but twice, then 3 times. Her hands had finally learned what her brain had been trying to teach them for months. Sat back and laughed out loud. It was a strange, wild laugh that came from somewhere deep inside her. She had done it. She had conquered the impossible passage. And if she could do that, maybe she could do anything. Her parents never knew what was happening in her bedroom every night. They thought she was just relaxing with her little keyboard, playing simple tunes to unwind after helping at the laundromat. They had no idea their daughter was attempting something extraordinary, and wanted to keep it that way. She was not ready to share this part of herself with anyone. It was too precious, too fragile. What if she told them and they laughed? What if they said she was wasting her time? What if they reminded her that girls like her did not become pianists? So she kept her secret. She wore her headphones so no sound would escape. She practiced only after everyone else was asleep. She lived a double life, invisible by day and transformed by night. By the time she was 17 and Mr. announced the spring recital, had been working on the ballad for almost 2 years. She was not perfect. There were still sections that gave her trouble. There were still moments when her nerves got the best of her and her fingers stumbled. But she could play it, all 10 minutes of it, from memory. She had never performed it for anyone. She had never even played on a real piano. The keyboard in her bedroom was the only instrument she had ever touched. She did not know what it would feel like to sit at a grand piano with its weighted keys and resonant sound. She did not know if her skills would translate from her tiny bedroom to a real stage. But she knew one thing for certain. She had worked too hard and come too far to play something basic at that recital. She could not stand up there and perform a simple melody like everyone else. That would be a betrayal of everything she had fought for in those late-night hours. The ballade was more than just a piece of music to her. It was proof that she existed, proof that she mattered, proof that a quiet girl from a laundromat could dream big dreams and make them real through nothing but determination and love. There was a part near the end of the piece that always made emotional. The music builds and builds, growing more intense with every measure, until it reaches a climax that feels like a wave crashing against the shore. And then, just when you think it is over, there is a final passage of such heartbreaking beauty that it takes your breath away. Every time played that part, she thought about her parents. She thought about the sacrifices they had made. She thought about her father's calloused hands and her mother's tired eyes. She thought about all the dreams they had given up so that she could have a chance at something better. She wanted to make them proud, not with words because words had never come easily to her, but with music, with this music, with the ballade that had changed her life and become the secret anthem of her soul. The recital was in 3 weeks. 3 weeks to prepare for the most important moment of her life. 3 weeks to decide if she really had the courage to show the world who she truly was. Looked at her old keyboard, at the keys that had become her closest friends over the past 5 years. She took a deep breath and placed her fingers in position. And then she began to practice. Again, like she had done 1,000 times before, like she would do 1,000 times more. Because this was her dream, and nobody was going to take it away from her. The week before the recital was the longest week of life. Every day felt like it lasted 100 hours. Every night felt like it passed in a blink. Time had become her enemy, moving too slow when she wanted it fast and too fast when she needed it to slow down. At school, she walked through the hallways like a ghost. She sat in her classes but heard nothing the teachers said. Her mind was somewhere else entirely. It was at the piano, running through passages, worrying about the parts she still had not perfected, imagining all the ways everything could go wrong. Her classmates talked about the recital like it was a joke. During lunch, she overheard a group of them laughing about how they had not even practiced yet. One boy said he was just going to improvise something and see what happened. A girl said she would play the same simple song she had played at her cousin's birthday party 3 years ago. Nobody was taking this seriously. Nobody except. She wanted to tell them. She wanted to stand up and say that this recital was not a joke to her, that she had been preparing for this moment for years, that music was not just a class to pass or a requirement to fulfill. It was everything. But she stayed silent. She always stayed silent. That was who she was, the quiet girl who never spoke up, the invisible one who faded into the background while louder voices filled the room. On Wednesday, something happened that shook her confidence to its core. Mr. brought the class to the auditorium to see the stage where they would be performing. Had walked past that auditorium 100 times but had never been inside. When she stepped through the doors, her breath caught in her throat. The room was huge. Rows and rows of red velvet seats stretched back into the darkness. A large stage sat at the front, illuminated by bright lights that made everything look sharp and exposed. And there, in the center of the stage, was a grand piano. Had never seen a real grand piano up close before. It was massive and black and beautiful. The lid was propped open, revealing the strings and hammers inside like the instrument was showing off its heart. Mr. told everyone they could take turns sitting at the piano if they wanted to get comfortable with it before the performance. A few students walked up and banged out random notes, laughing and goofing around, but could not move. She stood frozen at the back of the auditorium, staring at that piano like it was a dragon she would have to face. That was not her little keyboard in her bedroom. That was a real instrument, a serious instrument, an instrument that professionals played in concert halls around the world. What was she thinking? How could she possibly perform the Chopin Ballade on that piano? She had never touched anything like it. The keys would feel different. The sound would be different. Everything would be different. For the first time in 2 years, felt real doubt creeping into her heart. That night she could not practice. She sat at her keyboard and stared at the keys, but her hands would not move. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that grand piano on the stage. She saw the empty seats that would soon be filled with people. She saw herself walking out under those bright lights, sitting down, and forgetting everything she had ever learned. What if she failed? What if she made a fool of herself in front of everyone? What if Mr. and her classmates laughed at her for trying to play something so far above her level? The thoughts spiraled in her head like a storm that would not stop. Thursday passed in a blur of anxiety. Friday was worse. By Saturday had barely slept in 3 days. Dark circles hung under her eyes. Her appetite was gone. She went through the motions of helping at the laundromat, folding clothes and greeting customers, but inside she was falling apart. Her mother noticed something was wrong. She asked if was feeling sick. Said she was fine, just tired from studying. Her mother gave her a long look but did not push further. There was too much work to do. On Sunday night, the night before the recital, reached her breaking point. She was sitting on her bed, knees pulled up to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Her keyboard sat in the corner, untouched. She had not practiced in 4 days. 4 days of letting fear win. 4 days of watching her dreams slip through her fingers like water. She had made a decision. She would play something simple at the recital, a basic piece that anyone could learn in a week. She would blend in with everyone else, get her passing grade, and forget this whole thing ever happened. It was safer that way, easier, less painful. She was about to text her one friend from school to ask what easy song she should play when there was a soft knock on her door. It was her grandmother. The old woman lived with them in the small apartment. She was tiny and frail, with white hair and hands that shook slightly when she moved. She had come to this country 10 years ago to be with her family, leaving behind everything she knew. She spoke little English, but her eyes always seemed to understand more than words could say. She shuffled into his room and sat down on the edge of the bed. For a long moment she said nothing. She just looked at with those deep, knowing eyes. Then she spoke in their native language, her voice soft and steady. "I hear you play every night," she said. His heart stopped. "What?" "These walls are thin, child, and these old ears still work." A small smile crossed her grandmother's face. "I know you wear your headphones, but sometimes late at night I press my ear to the wall, and I listen." Did not know what to say. All these years she thought her secret was safe. She thought no one knew. "That music you play," her grandmother continued, "it is not simple music. It is the kind of music that takes your whole soul to create. I do not know much about pianos or composers, but I know beauty when I hear it, and what you play is beautiful." Tears spilled down his cheeks. She could not hold them back anymore. "I am scared," she whispered. "I am so scared I cannot do it. Everyone expects me to be nothing. What if they are right?" Her grandmother reached out and took his hands in her own. Her grip was weak but warm. "Let me tell you something," she said. "When I was young, back in our village, I wanted to be a singer. I had a voice that made people stop and listen, but my family was poor. Girls like me were not supposed to dream of such things, so I stayed quiet. I got married. I raised children. I worked until my bones ached, and I never sang for anyone again." She paused and saw something flicker in her grandmother's eyes, an old sadness, a wound that had never fully healed. "I have lived a good life," her grandmother said. "I have no regrets about my family or my choices, but there are nights, even now, when I lie awake and wonder what might have been. What if I had been brave enough to try? What if I had let the world hear my voice, even just once?" She squeezed hands. "The world will always expect little from people like us. That is their blindness, child, not your limitation. You have a gift. I have heard it through these thin walls for years. Do not make the same mistake I made. Do not let fear silence you. Was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. But what if I fail? She asked. Her grandmother smiled, and it was the most tender smile had ever seen. Then you fail, and the sun will still rise the next morning, and you will still be my granddaughter, and I will still be proud of you for trying. But what if you do not fail? What if you walk onto that stage and show them all who you really are? What if you fly? She leaned forward and kissed his forehead. Play what is in your heart, child. That is all any of us can do. She stood up slowly and shuffled toward the door, but before she left, she turned back one last time. I will be there tomorrow, in the audience, listening, the way I have been listening through these walls all along. And then she was gone. Sat alone in her room, her grandmother's words echoing in her mind. She looked at her keyboard in the corner. She thought about the grand piano waiting on that stage. She thought about all the years of practice, all the late nights, all the dreams she had carried in secret. And slowly, something changed inside her. The fear was still there. It would probably always be there. But now there was something stronger rising up beside it, something that felt like fire, something that felt like hope. She wiped her tears, walked to her keyboard and put on her headphones. Tomorrow, she would show them everything. The morning of the recital arrived like any other morning. The sun came up. The birds sang outside the window. The washing machines downstairs began their familiar rumble, but everything felt different. The air felt heavier. The light felt sharper. Her heart felt like it was beating twice as fast as normal. She got dressed slowly, putting on the nicest clothes she owned. A simple black dress her mother had bought her for a family wedding 2 years ago. It was nothing fancy, but it was clean and neat and made her feel like she was about to do something important. Her hands were shaking as she brushed her hair. She looked at herself in the small mirror above her dresser and barely recognized the girl staring back. There was fear in those eyes, yes, but there was something else too, something that looked almost like determination. She skipped breakfast. Her stomach was too tight to eat anything. Her mother asked if she was okay and just nodded and said she had a school event today. She did not mention the recital. She did not mention the piano. She was not ready to explain any of it yet. Her grandmother caught her eye as she was leaving the apartment. The old woman was sitting in her usual chair by the window, a cup of tea in her trembling hands. She did not say anything. She just smiled and gave a small nod. That nod said everything. I believe in you. I will be there. Show them who you are. Nodded back, grabbed her bag and walked out the door. The walk to school felt longer than usual. Every step brought her closer to the moment she had been dreading and dreaming about for years. She passed the familiar streets, the corner store where she sometimes bought snacks, the bus stop where she waited every rainy morning. Everything looked the same as always, but nothing felt the same. When she arrived at school, the hallways were buzzing with energy. Students from the music class were gathered in groups, talking and laughing about the recital. Some of them looked nervous. Most of them looked like they could not care less. To them, this was just another assignment to get through. Walked past them without a word. She went straight to the auditorium and slipped inside through the back door. The room was being set up for the event. Teachers arranged chairs. Someone tested the microphone on stage, and there, under the bright lights, sat the grand piano, waiting for her. Found a seat in the back corner and sat down. She would wait here until it was time. She would watch the others perform. And then, when her name was called, she would walk up to that stage and do what she had been preparing to do for the past 2 years. The hours crawled by. More people started to arrive. Parents filtered in, taking seats near the front. Students from other classes came to watch their friends. Teachers stood along the walls, clipboards in hand. The auditorium slowly filled with the hum of conversation and the rustle of programs being handed out. Scanned the crowd looking for her grandmother. For a moment she could not find her and her heart sank. But then she spotted her. The tiny old woman had slipped into an aisle seat near the back, almost hidden behind a taller parent in front of her. She was wearing her best sweater, the one she saved for special occasions, and she was looking straight at with those warm, steady eyes. Felt something loosen in her chest. She was not alone. The recital began. One by one, students walked onto the stage and performed their pieces. Simple melodies filled the auditorium. A basic pop song, a nursery rhyme played with one hand, a slow, easy classical piece that even beginners could manage. The audience clapped politely after each performance, but nobody seemed particularly impressed. This was exactly what everyone expected. Nothing special, nothing memorable. Mr. sat in the front row, marking grades on his clipboard. He looked bored. He had seen 100 recitals just like this one. He was probably already thinking about what he would have for dinner. Watched each performance with growing anxiety. Her turn was coming. With every name that was called, she got closer to the moment of truth. Her palms were sweating. Her mouth was dry. She could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears like a drum. And then she heard it. Her name. Mr. called it out without any special emphasis, just another student on his list. Stood up on shaky legs. The walk from her seat to the stage felt like a mile. She could feel eyes on her, but she knew most people were not really paying attention. She was just the quiet girl from the back of the class. Nobody expected anything from her. She climbed the steps to the stage. The lights were brighter up here than she had imagined. They made everything else disappear. The audience became a dark blur. The only thing that existed was her and the piano. She walked to the bench and sat down. The seat was cold. The keys stretched out before her, black and white, perfect and terrifying. She placed her fingers in position and took a deep breath. For one horrible moment, her mind went completely blank. She could not remember how the piece started. She could not remember anything. Panic surged through her body like ice water. But then she closed her eyes, and she thought about her grandmother. She thought about her parents, working day and night so she could have a better life. She thought about all those late nights in her tiny bedroom, practicing until her fingers bled. She thought about the 12-year-old girl who had heard Chopin for the first time and felt her whole world change. She was not playing for the audience. She was not playing for a grade. She was playing for herself, for the girl who had dreamed in secret for so long. And then her fingers began to move. The opening notes of the Chopin ballade floated into the air, soft, gentle, like a question being whispered in the dark. At first, nothing changed. The audience kept shifting in their seats. A few people checked their phones. Mr. glanced down at his clipboard. But then something started to happen. The music grew. It swelled and expanded, filling every corner of the auditorium. His fingers danced across the keys with a confidence she did not know she had. The melody sang out pure and clear, rising and falling like waves on the ocean. Heads began to lift. Phones were slowly lowered. People stopped whispering. One by one, every person in that room turned their attention to the small girl on stage who was creating something they had never expected to hear. Mr. pen stopped moving. He stared at with his mouth slightly open, as if he was seeing her for the first time. The piece built in intensity, played the fast passages with precision, her hands flying across the keyboard in a blur. She played the soft passages with heartbreaking tenderness, drawing out each note like it was the last word of a love letter. She was not just playing the music, she was living it. Every phrase told a story, every silence held meaning. Tears began to form in her eyes, but she did not stop. She could not stop. The music had taken over. It was pouring out of her like something that had been trapped inside for too long and was finally free. She reached the climax of the piece, the part that had always made her think of her parents. The notes crashed like thunder, powerful and overwhelming, and then just as suddenly they softened into the final passage. The melody became gentle again, achingly beautiful, like the last rays of sunlight before the night. Played the final notes. Her fingers lifted from the keys. The last sound faded into silence. For a moment, nobody moved. The auditorium was completely still. Sat at the piano, her heart pounding, her eyes still closed. And then the room exploded. The applause came like a wave crashing over her from every direction. People were standing. People were cheering. Some were wiping tears from their eyes. Mr. had risen from his seat, his clipboard forgotten on the floor. Opened her eyes and looked out at the audience. And there in the back row she saw her grandmother. The old woman was standing too, clapping with her trembling hands, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. She was smiling the biggest smile had ever seen. And in that moment, knew that everything had changed. She was not invisible anymore. Did not remember walking off the stage. She did not remember the hands that reached out to touch her shoulder or the voices that called her name. Everything was a blur of light and sound, an overwhelming emotion. Her body moved on autopilot while her mind tried to process what had just happened. She found herself backstage, standing alone in a quiet corner behind the heavy curtains. Her hands were still trembling. Her heart was still racing. She leaned against the wall and tried to catch her breath. She had done it. She had actually done it. All those years of practicing in secret, all those nights of sore fingers and tired eyes, all those moments of doubt when she thought she would never be good enough. It had all led to this. 10 minutes on a stage that had changed everything. The curtain rustled and Mr. appeared. He looked different than had ever seen him before. The bored expression was gone. The tired eyes were wide and alert. He walked toward her slowly, like he was approaching something precious and fragile. "I owe you an apology," he said. Blinked, she had not expected that. "I have been teaching for 23 years, Mr. continued. And in all that time, I thought I had seen everything. I thought I knew which students had talent and which ones were just passing through. I looked at you and saw a quiet girl who would play something simple and fade away like all the others." He shook his head, and there was something like shame in his eyes. "I was wrong. I was so wrong. What you did out there was not just impressive for a student. It was impressive for anyone. Professional pianists spend their entire careers trying to play that piece the way you just played it, and you taught yourself, on your own, without any help from me or anyone else." He paused and took a deep breath. "I am sorry I never saw you. I am sorry I never asked what you were working on or offered to help. You deserved better from me. You deserved better from all of us." Did not know what to say. No teacher had ever spoken to her like this before. No adult had ever apologized to her for anything. "Thank you," she whispered. It was all she could manage. Mr. nodded. "There are people out there who want to talk to you, parents, other teachers, but take your time. This is your moment. Enjoy it." He turned and walked away, leaving alone with her thoughts. A few minutes later, she finally stepped out from behind the curtain. The auditorium was buzzing with energy. People were standing in groups, talking excitedly. When they saw, several of them rushed toward her. A woman she did not recognize grabbed her hand and shook it enthusiastically. She said she was a music teacher at another school, and that had a rare gift. A man in a suit gave her his business card and said he worked with a youth orchestra that was always looking for talented pianists. A girl from her class, someone who had never spoken to before, told her that was the most amazing thing she had ever seen. Smiled and nodded and said thank you over and over again. But the whole time, her eyes were searching the crowd for one person. She found her grandmother near the back of the auditorium, standing in the same spot where she had watched the performance. The old woman had not moved. She was just waiting, patient and calm, the way she always was. Walked toward her, and the crowd seemed to part without her even asking. When she reached her grandmother, neither of them spoke. They just looked at each other for a long moment. And then her grandmother opened her arms and fell into them. They held each other tight, 2 generations of dreams and sacrifices wrapped in one embrace. Could feel her grandmother's thin body shaking with quiet sobs. She could feel her own tears soaking into the old woman's sweater. "You flew," her grandmother whispered, "just like I knew you would." They stayed like that for a long time, the noise of the auditorium fading away until it was just the two of them, holding onto each other, and a moment that would live in their hearts forever. That night went home to the small apartment above the laundromat. Everything looked the same as always. The worn furniture, the thin walls, the sound of washing machines rumbling below, but nothing felt the same. She felt like a different person walking through a familiar door. Her parents were waiting for her. Her grandmother had called them from the auditorium, and they had closed the laundromat early for the first time in years. When walked in, her mother pulled her into a fierce hug. Her father stood nearby, his eyes wet with tears he was trying hard to hide. "Why did you never tell us?" her mother asked. "All these years you were doing this and we had no idea." "I was scared," admitted. "I did not want to disappoint you if I failed." Her father stepped forward and put his hand on her shoulder. He was not a man who spoke much. He showed his love through work, through sacrifice, through the quiet dedication of showing up every single day. But now he looked at his daughter and spoke from his heart. "You could never disappoint us," he said. "We came to this country with nothing so that you could have everything, and look what you did with it. You made something beautiful out of nothing. That is all we ever wanted for you." Cried again that night, but they were happy tears, the kind that wash away years of loneliness and doubt and leave something clean and new behind. The video went online 2 days later. One of her classmates had recorded the entire performance on his phone. He uploaded it to social media with a simple caption: "Girl stuns entire school with incredible piano performance. Nobody saw this coming." Within a week, the video had been viewed over 2 million times. Comments poured in from around the world. Professional musicians said they were blown away by her technique. Music teachers asked how she had learned to play like that without formal training. Strangers wrote that they had watched the video with tears in their eyes, moved by the raw emotion in her playing. News outlets picked up the story. A local television station came to interview and her family at the laundromat. The reporter asked what it felt like to go viral overnight, just smiled shyly, and said she was still trying to understand it all. The opportunities came fast after that. A prestigious music conservatory offered her a full scholarship. A famous pianist who had seen the video reached out and offered to mentor her. Invitations arrived to perform at concerts and events she had only ever dreamed of attending. But for the greatest gift was not the fame or the scholarships or the bright future that now stretched out before her. It was the look on her grandmother's face that night at the recital. It was the pride in her father's eyes. It was the knowledge that she had taken a chance on herself and discovered something she never knew she had. The courage to be seen. Months later, sat at a real grand piano in a real concert hall, preparing for her first professional performance. The audience was larger than anything she had ever imagined. The lights were brighter. The stakes were higher. But she was not afraid anymore. She thought about the girl she used to be, the invisible one who practiced in secret and dreamed in silence. That girl was still inside her somewhere. She always would be. But now there was something else too. A voice that had finally learned to sing out loud. She placed her fingers on the keys and took a deep breath. She thought about her grandmother, who would be watching from the front row tonight. She thought about her parents, who had given up their own dreams so she could chase hers. She thought about everyone who had ever been told they were not enough, that they should stay quiet, that people like them did not get to have big dreams. And then she began to play. Because this was her story, and it was only just beginning.